predicated off the resolution. They are predicated off of their adding words to the resolution. Means that we have already been skewed out of debate. This is why they were able to access all of these apolitical defensive arguments as well as all their link terms on a gauntlet. Means that they have already skewed us out of the debate. There is actual abuse within the debate. Further, you can extend a priori that this is an a priori issue. It's a gateway issue. Before we have to decide, what the rules of the game are before we actually engage in the game. Means that you vote on this before anything else. Even if they try and do something silly like go for the outweighs topicality, which they have made. So the whole point of order that next argument is that even if you don't think there is even if you don't think there's real abuse, there is potential abuse, and I think potential abuse is a voting issue for a couple of reasons. The first is the first is that the reason we have speed limits is to deter potential speeders. Means that it's the most real world to evaluate debates off of potential abuse, because that's how things actually work in the real world. Because the speed limits act to deter you from potentially speeding. Means that there is potential reason for you to speed. That's why the speed limits exist. The second argument is that real abuse is almost impossible to articulate in parliamentary debate because we don't have backside rebuttals. The only place that real abuse would happen is in like the PMR, or the 1A or 2A, but we don't have those backside rebuttals, which means that there's no actual way for you to get to the real abuse. It means that potential abuse is always going to be a prior question. So yeah, that's really it. Like, their we meet is nonsensical. The counter-interpretation is not specific, and they have conceded precision, which I think is the most important standard in the debate, because it's a reason why we control the actual literature base of what the resolution is about. It means that their arguments about common use don't get them anywhere. Their arguments about common use, probably the common use of the word Guantanamo Bay refers to the area, to the body of water off the Caribbean coast, because that is what all of the literature indicates. That's what all of our offense is going to be about. That's what all of that's actually how they get access to both of their advantages and all of their link terms. It's reasons why they solve biopower and all of these things, because to get back to detention center. If they resolution is asking for the detention center, they would have said detention center. They don't. He makes this argument about how they don't need an RBI. That's fine, but I don't think that gets them around the fact that they have poorly mishandled the topicality argument in its entirety by not responding to the warrant of the precision standard. You have anything else, Nick? No. So you're voting negative.
Okay. There's going to be two. Is anyone not ready?
I'm sorry, what's the order?
Wow.
We're going
to the case out. It's going to be T.
Gotcha.
UT Tyler J.H. wins this debate for a litany of really convincing reasons, but I'm going to argue a few of them here that make the ballot pretty easy for you to decide. Now, the combination of us winning the competing interpretations paradigm and the fact that topicality is an a priori means that you're always going to vote for the negative interpretation on a risk of offense. Now, let me explain why. First, they just totally cold concede the fact that topicality is an a priori. They didn't even breathe on this issue in the MG, which means that if we are winning that our topicality interpretation is good, then you're going to vote on it before the affirmative. They can't lay their aff. That is just functionally impossible for them. It's inaccessible. But that in combination with the fact that we are winning competing interpretations, they concede the fact that it's inevitable, and Carter does a great job articulating why reasonability is going to be bad for debate. That means if there is if there is an infinitesimally small risk of offense on that our interpretation is better, that means you're automatically going to pull the trigger for T. It's just that simple. But in addition, they have the burden of affirming the resolution. Right? Like, if they wanted to reject the topic, they probably should have done that at the PMC. But they didn't do that. They didn't justify extra topicality. They just started reading a bunch of offense that is not related to the resolution. Now, they're going to come up here and make this argument that our T interpretation is very silly. But our precision standard pretty well articulates why our interp is not silly. Now, there are a few reasons why our precision indicates that you are going to go to this T interpretation. They indicate that we're not going to have any real debate because of our interpretation. That's problematic because just because they can't come up with a reason that that topic would be good doesn't mean that it's going to be bad for debate. Precision is going to be the #1 sampling of today's round because it is the #1 internal link into fairness, because a precise interpretation of the resolution is the only thing that can provide a praxis, like a common starting point for the round, but also it is the only thing that allows for predictability. We only have 20 minutes to prep in a parliamentary debate, and we have to have some sort of common point for that debate to actually happen. Now, we indicate through our interpretation that we're talking about the Bay of Water around Guantanamo. When we say the Gulf of Mexico, we're not talking about Mexico or Texas. We're talking about the water that surrounds those areas. In the same way, when we say Guantanamo Bay as a geographical term, that means we are talking about the water surrounding Guantanamo, not the detention center that is landlocked. Now, the next region you're going to be good enough for precision is that it's the key internal link into education. You can classify the analysis, the predictability analysis I just did. There's really nothing else for me to say. It's an a priori that was conceded. You're going to be voting on competing interpretations. A risk of offense means you're going to vote nay. They don't give you enough offensive reasons. They make maybe 3 arguments that can be considered offensive. Carver freaking demolishes them in the MO, so you're always going to be pulling the trigger. Do you want anything else?
And you said me too.
Oh yeah. Extend our interpretation. Guantanamo Bay is the body of water off the coast of the Caribbean currently occupied by U.S. naval forces. Also, extend the fact that their pattern interpretation is freaking nonsensical. They say, quote, includes detention camp. That's not a sensible interpretation. You can't vote for it in the reading interpretation paradigm voting.
Okay. So the order's going to be case. Just say T. Case out waste off capital.
While politics solve back,
I'm already not money. Well, might as well get it. Never mind.
Alrighty then. Everybody ready? Okay. First on topicality, extend across the we meet argument and derivatives. The reason why this we meet argument makes quite a bit of sense actually is when you look at the argument contextually and the way the round is played out. The first argument that you can extend across is all the inherent, or is all the background arguments that we give you, specifically about the fact that we have we've been leasing the land, which is Guantanamo Bay, from the country of Cuba since the 1900s, and in 1959 is when they began to protest this. This argument is indicative of the fact the only area in this region that we can give back is the land that we are leasing. We have our troops stationed in the ocean, however we do not own the ocean, so that is not property that we can give back. This is the fundamental basis of Drew's we meet argument, where he basically explains to you the dynamic of what the actually getting something back means, which goes co-conceded in the round. Look, the only real, the next argument that we need here.
Point of order, this contextualization and cross-application of the background information didn't happen in the EMG. There's no contextualization of why this is a reasonable interpretation of the EMG.
Sure, so this is a response to the brand new MO argument that our we meet is nonsensical. We are explaining why this is not nonsense. Those are the words out of Carver's mouth.
I feel like you should have done that.
I'll take it. Just like.
Hey, Luke, you want us to keep calling points of order? Or?
Yeah, call them as you need to.
Okay.
Hold on just a second. Yep, got it.
Alright. Next, the only other argument that we need to hear is that we win literature-based. When we make argumentation as to why literature-based is going to be the internal link to predictability and which they claim is the internal link to fairness, which we say is the internal link to fairness, these are going to be reasons why winning predictability means that we win all other, where winning literature-based means that we win all other standards. This is where you're going to sit across the number 2 argumentation on advantage 1, which is that Guantanamo Bay is the number 1 focus point for international criticism of U.S. policy. We say that all the names we gave you are all reasons why the specific region that they have labeled as Guantanamo Bay, the literature base indicates that this region specifically is the detention center. These are good enough reasons as to why, number 1, we say that we control the literature base because international bodies define Guantanamo Bay as the area including the detention center. Means that that's
I'm really sorry, this will probably be the last one I call, but I don't think you should get access to cross-applications for advantages that were not done explicitly in the MG.
Okay, so my reply to this would be that the new MO arguments, because T was exploded in the MO, that the new MO analysis as to why we are not part of the literature base gives me room to explain why we are.
I'm pretty sure I made a reference to our app when I made it.
Alright. The next argument that I'm going to get here is that the reason that they say that it's not in the literature base is because of the specific language calling it the bay itself. We say that this is non-responsive to our arguments and say that number 1, actually wait, the next argument that you can extend across here is going to be the second answer that we gave in CX, which is we remove all troops from this region. They did not ask, they didn't specify whether this is land troops or naval troops, so we're going to indicate that this is a pretty good reason as to why we meet our counter-interpretation in a world where we're removing all troops from Guantanamo Bay, which was specified in CX. This is going to be a reason as to why we meet their interpretation. Next, yeah, Drew.
Also, our counter-interpretation does make sense as the area including the detention center because their counter-interpretation, or their answer is the area including the bay.
Next, our kind interpretation makes sense in a world where their interpretation simply specifies the area including the bay. This means that our interpretation of the area including the detention center is 100% inclusive of their interpretation, and they give no offensive reason why this interpretation is bad. Look, we're going to win literature based for a few reasons. Number one, it is pretty clear by the way he starts his position, saying that this is probably going to sound like nonsense, but this is important, that it is kind of agreed upon that Guantanamo Bay includes the region, including the detention center. Extend across his own words, and the reason why he uses that to start off the topicality. The next argument that we need here is go down to where,
predictability is the internal link to ground, and that's the literature base.
we say that literature base is the internal link to predictability because the only way that we can discuss, if you type in Guantanamo Bay to Google, whether you go on images or web, the first 10 things that are going to pop up are all reasons as to why Guantanamo Bay is, the Guantanamo Bay Detention Center is pretty bad. And these are going to be reasons as to why the literature base and the way that we use these words is going to be the internal link to predictability because the only way that we can predict what offense is going to come in the round is by is through the research that we do in the 20 minutes prior to the round. This means that this is going to be the internal link to any kind of fairness in the round because the only way that we can have fair and equitable debate is by being the act being able to predict what the next strat is and by the neg being able to predict what the affirmative strat is. And only having a clear literature base makes this argument true, which means that we control the internal link to both of their standards because we say in a world where you don't have fairness, that eliminates any possibility for education. Because in a world where you don't have fairness, that means that there's no education going on in the round because there's no clash, which is the only way that we actually gain education in the round is by being able to go in depth into the issues themselves. Yeah.
Go ahead and go down to don't vote on potential votes.
Sure, yeah. Go down now to don't vote on potential abuse. This is a brand new argument. Here's a few reasons why that's bunk. The first argument is going to be that they say that speed limit stops other people from speeding. This is nonsensical and probably debate where we're never going to have this round again, and we're never going to have this specific resolution again. That means that you don't actually set a precedent where people now talk about Guantanamo Bay as the area of being the bay because these precedents don't occur. These precedents don't occur in a world where we no longer actually have, or where we never actually have this debate again. This means that you should only vote on actual in-round proven abuse. This is going to be for a few reasons. Number one, voting on potential abuse is literally the same thing as voting on an advantage that we never read, or on a dissent that was never read in the round, that magically 100% is going to solve for all of case. Look, voting on potential abuse it makes absolutely no sense because it's voting on arguments that weren't made in the round and on discussions that weren't had in the round, which means that you're voting against us for something that we could possibly do, not actions that we've taken. Yeah.
Real abuse is possible.
We say that real abuse is possible and that showing real abuse is possible, and we no link to any of their arguments by saying that we're not talking about the body of water, we're talking about the detention center. This would show real actual in-round abuse. Hold them to a standard of real in-round abuse because that's the only actual way to determine whether there's any damage done by the act. Okay?
You're right now. Good bit.
Yes.
Yeah, don't infect me.
Got
I shouldn't have even done
Good job.
Yeah, Jeremiah said that.
Yeah, damn, I stood in the same room as the guy.
that. You're not quarantined?
No, unfortunately. But not easily. Although I think I caught it, so.
Hey, Luke, do you need a few minutes?
Yeah, like 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm
I don't
gonna
think
restart.
so, yeah. Yeah, you got time for it.
I might stay outside as well, just a little hot.
Is that right if we record the RFT as well?
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Congrats on getting it to the 8th round.
Yeah. All right, so I vote for the affirmative. Here's what happens. This is a really close debate. Honestly, I think, could have, I guess, justified a decision for voting on T. I think that there are some mistakes being made on either side, but ultimately what my decision comes down to is that the bulk of your T argumentation comes down to the notion that the word was not in the resolution, which is somewhat persuasive to me about the extra T and stuff. But I just don't think that y'all are doing enough to engage. I mean, I guess you can't because it's the PMR, but that's sort of determined by the structure of y'all's strategy here. That the PMR is telling me lots of arguments that, and this is what it ultimately comes down to, because the precision arguments and the literature arguments aren't directly talking to each other in this debate, neither of you are directly saying one is better than the other in any meaningful way. I mean, you might assert it at some point, but these aren't arguments that are being made in depth. I'm having to pick essentially what I think that the literature does mean when it talks about Guantanamo Bay, and ultimately I am compelled that I just do not think that the resolution was intending for the affirmative to be prohibited from talking about the detention center, which is essentially what y'all's argument is, that the 1AC is prohibited from talking about the detention center and can only talk about the things that are happening in the water. So again, it's that y'all's argument on that level is just not persuasive to me when compared to the arguments that I'm getting on the standards debate from the affirmative that talks about how literature is key to predictability, particularly in this debate where it just says Guantanamo Bay and everyone has a shared understanding that we're at least also talking about the people who are in the detention center and not merely the water around it. Now, I don't read a shit ton of literature about Guantanamo Bay, so perhaps it's the case that every single time that it comes up, they do talk about the detention center as opposed to the bay. But I feel like it's pretty common for people to understand Guantanamo Bay to be talking about both the detention center, the land, the bay around it, whatever. There's also the interaction of the potential abuse arguments, but I think that because all of those arguments are brand new coming out of the 2 and C, the 2 and C, then the block gets all new responses, and so all of those arguments end up going away, and I'm looking at the end-round abuse argument, which y'all do have some, but I just think that they are less correct than the arguments that are coming out of the PMR. One of the things that your plain text is the resolution.
Yeah.
How can you not be topical? Like, it's literally impossible if your plain text is the resolution. And that
Yeah,
argument alone, I think, wins you the entire debate straight out of the gate, because then you get to say all of the things that they say are extra topical are just solvency shit. Like, yeah, fine, we do the resolution, whatever you say that means, but the effect of solvency is going to be that the detention center is going to go away, and all of those things. And there was one other thing. Oh yeah, I think it also doesn't help y'all completely that I don't understand the 1AC to be saying that we're only giving back the detention center. I take them to be saying both in the point of information that's asked and right out of the gate in the plain text, that they just basically, their response to your point of order is like, whatever American shit is in this area goes away. So that does seem to talk, again, that doesn't answer extra topicality, but the extra topicality stuff gets, answered by the literature arguments and the lack of potential abuse and the Bay arguments. So, does that make sense? Do y'all have any questions for me about how I resolve something?
I'm a little confused how you resolve the actual abuse claims when they're not responded to by the PMR.
Because the only argument that I have that you're talking about in in-round abuse is you have the shell talking about how all of their case offense comes off of the extra topicality. That's because all of your arguments are that they get to abuse us because they are extra topical. I think you are losing the argument that they are extra topical.
Okay. So I guess the argument I was trying to make was that the way that they get to link term the criticism and the way that they get to access link terms for the case terms are granted to them by the extra topicality argument. So
if you had explained that to me as simply as you did just now, I might have, I'm not saying that definitely would have won the debate, but part of this is that the arguments that you really want me to vote for you on are just lost in the flow. You know what I mean? It's just one of the things that you say. So I think that, sorry, and repeat what you just said.
That the argument is that their extra topicality is bad because it gives them access to link terms on the case terms and on the criticism that
Yeah.
they shouldn't get.
The argument as it comes out of the block is they are abusing us because of their biopolitics impacts.
Okay.
I think if you're more clear about the way that they are able to eliminate your ability to run the critique, which is probably not going to be super convincing to me anyways, because I don't think that they do really do, like you totally can still win this critique, like they haven't just backed out of their critique by saying biopolitics. In fact, at the top of the debate when I was listening to this, I was thinking the concession, that y'all have arguments that they need to be answering better on these advantages. Yeah, I mean, that's part of it, is that I don't think that they're abusing you by using those advantages, and I don't think that you explain clearly that it's the link turn, that they're able to link turn your criticism out of or any criticism that applies to the resolution out of being around.
Thank you very much.
Also, on all sides, and this happened from everyone and throughout the entire tournament, read the judging philosophies carefully, because y'all are not doing at least 3 or 4 things that I specify in my philosophy. I want you to always do this. So those are things like I mentioned that I much prefer, although not a conversational tone, but clarity is the very most important thing to me. So this might be like maybe the argument that you're saying is something that does come up in the round, but you're not being clear enough for those arguments to come out of my throat. Also, the other big one that I've been hammering on everyone is an explain like I'm 5. At the top of every position, you should just give me 10 seconds that just says, our critique says this, like this is what our argument is for. Our topicality argument is saying that you only get to talk about the day, you do not get to talk about anything else. Okay, so
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, the other neighbor.
No.
Possibly.
I thought this one was clear.
So, yeah, it is clear, actually. I'm pretty sure.